Hello, my name is Mana,
Hello, my name is Ismael.
and we're going to share some research that we did this past year on looking at different segments of highly involved gamblers using presential EGM data. I'm from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, representing the International Gaming Institute, and
I'm Ismael. I am from the Rey Juan Carlos University in
in,
Spain.
that's right. So just a quick disclosure statement. We did get some funding. This study was funded by the UNLV International Gaming Institute and the Nevada Council on Problem Gambling. And then it was also funded by the Latentia project from the Spanish Ministry of Research. None of these parties were involved with any of the parts of the study, and so I just wanted to disclose that. And then we wanted to also give a big shout out to Axis.ai, who have been big supporters of research at UNLV and of myself. That's me holding one of their Internet of Things black box data gatherers. And yeah, thanks, Axis.
And for the background, we can see the data plus granularity, and that is to help the program gambling detection.
That's right. So new forms of data have really been coming out from both on the table games and on the slot machines. And so this has really enabled operators and other stakeholders to gain a new form of data that's more granular than we've ever seen before, enabling different kind of analyses at a much deeper level. And then, so just to give a little bit of background on slot machines, they've really been sort of under the spotlight in terms of impulse control disorders because of those fast cycles and the jackpots and all that stimulation that players get from them. Yet, they've really been under researched when it comes to responsible gambling. So we're going to dig into that a little bit more. And so basically, most of the research that's been done has not really been looking at slot machines. They've mostly been looking at online gaming or sports betting. But the studies that do use clustering, they either look at the full population, so all of the gamblers, and they mostly use k-means algorithms. And so the two big issues here is that nobody's really looked at if our goal is to try and detect problem gamblers or highly involved gamblers in this case, why aren't we looking at the actual subgroups of those problem gamblers? So yes, there's part of like detecting it, but that's really been established. So we want to really dig in there and say, okay, now that we detected that these players exist, what are the different profiles of these players?
And for the study objectives, the first one is, does a group of highly involved AGM gamblers exist? And the second one is, if so, how do they differ from the rest of the population? And for the last one, are all the highly involved AGM gamblers created equally?
That's right. So, like we said, first we want to see like, can we identify them? Second, what are the characteristics that identify them? And third, um, are they do, once we identify them, is that group of problem gamblers, are they the same or highly involved players? Are they the same? And so we took a bunch of data from that Axis provided us of Polish presential EGM gamblers over the course of about just over a year. And this included transaction level data, so ticket in, ticket out on all the on all the different slot machines. And then we were also given, so once we got that data, we computed both demographic variable, well, we pulled out demographic variables, and then we computed all kind of different behavioral variables based on frequency, intensity, duration, amount, and trajectory, which are like the standard responsible gambling variables. And then down here is a little schema of the way the data works. So that little black box that I was holding in another picture, that gets plugged in the back of the slot machines and it takes data and it shoots it up to the cloud, where then it's stored in both transaction level and bet level. And so for this project, we only use transaction level data. Um, and so to answer that first question, are there highly involved gamblers? The answer is yes, because we could see here on these three different graphs in terms of number of sessions, the total deposit amount, and the average session win or loss, we can see these points of discontinuity where it seems pretty constant. All of a sudden, at the end, you have those sort of outlier spenders, outlier players, outlier behaviors, and so um, then digging into those players, we see some different characteristics in terms of demographic. Um, what we see here is that the actually there were higher percentage of highly involved players among older players, which is kind of goes against what previous literature has said, where younger players are have a higher tendency to gamble. And then second, we saw that there wasn't really much difference in gender. Um, Previous literature says that males are more likely to have to be highly involved gamblers, but of course, this population is so skewed that it's sort of hard to get a clear-cut picture of any difference. And so, looking at some of the different behaviors, when we compared the groups, we saw that highly involved players had 5 times more daily spend, 2 times more transactions, 4 times more frequency. And then in terms of their deposits, they actually deposited twice as many times. Um, and then we saw in terms of their session play, we saw that they had 10 times more sessions and they had twice as long sessions. And then the big kicker at the end is that they actually ended up losing 2.5 times more. Mm.
Yeah, and all highly involved players is the same. So in this picture, we can see very separate two clusters, red and blue clusters, cluster 0 and cluster 1, and a few gamblers and population clusters, that's the cluster 2 and the cluster less 1. And the differentiation of this cluster in UMAP, that not unsupervised learning model, we can see that the highly involved players is not the same. So if you continue,
Yeah,
Marco.
so what we're seeing here is Ismael's magic, where he's basically taken all these different variables, found a way to combine them optimally, and then used that sort of combinate those combinations to extract different groups of players. And so, diving into the clusters a little bit, we'll talk about them. So, that -1 cluster, we see that these are sort of irregular players, and there weren't very many of them, but we see that really like extreme outcomes, a lot of volatility in their play, night sessions, and so these people are certainly could be high risk. Second, we see the cluster 0, which we see high engagement, regular play. But we really see stability there. We see someone that comes, maybe enjoys gambling, spends some money and comes pretty regularly. Um, and then the third cluster was sort of people that kind of gambled more responsibly, that probably like to gamble, but it wasn't sort of their thing. But they still came and spent a lot of money, just not so often. And then lastly, we have another one of those sort of outlier, sort of high risk, high potential for risk, extra high potential for risk. I mean, obviously they're all highly involved, but this cluster particularly has sort of those what are they? The whale players, where they come and they bring a lot of money, and they play very intensely, and they have sort of like these rapid, fast, hit hard, hit fast kind of sessions. Um, and so, sort of the implications of the study is that, well, first, yes, we do have that small group of players that drive the disproportionate share of gambling activity. So we know that our population that we have to target is the very small amount of player, and this is consistent with sort of what the industry sees and what academia sees in terms of small amount of players making up a lot of the revenue or making up a lot of the problematic behaviors. And so then when we sort of dive into those two groups, like the sort of mass players and then those like high risk players, we're seeing that they do show multiplicatively higher proportions of at-risk behavior, whether that's frequency of session, whether that's spend, whether that's time between sessions. So these are sort of things that can help us identify those highly involved players. And then when it comes to actually making interventions and coming up with different RG strategies, I think it's really important that we understand that these highly involved players, or these players that are sort of high risk players, they have different sort of profiles as we've seen in those clusters. So our strategy might not be the same for a guy that comes very regularly and tends to spend the same amount of money, even though it's a lot, as someone that is coming and spending a ton of money at being very volatile, playing really hard, playing really fast, and just exhibiting really weird behaviors. And so, with that, that is all. So, thank you guys for listening and connect with us on LinkedIn. I will leave the links in the description below.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.